My name is Benedict. This video is in response to AP Mastering's new video. I think it's like 12 hours old or something. I just saw it this morning, and he's talking about how in Dorville, my term, we've become so obsessed with gear, and we think that if we've just got the right gear and the right techniques, tips and tricks, that we can somehow turn any performance, no matter how shoddy, into something amazeballs. And I, like most mature engineers, have been saying, no, this is not going to happen. But it has just dominated Dorville over the last 10, 20 years, that it's all just about getting the right gear and the right tips and tricks. And he's showing quite directly, using his own method, that you're not going to get there. Now, he very kindly actually put up his project that he used for people who wanted to take him on. I'm taking him on, but not in an oppositional way. I'm actually backing it up by saying, look, here's another mix engineer who is going to work this material and see if it solves with a decent mix. And no, it doesn't. So we'll start with a quick A-B. On the number 1 slot, we have the mix down of what Mr. AP Mastering did. And then on the number 2 slot, we have my mix. So I've just made a mix, as much as you can make a mix of, like 4 or 8 bars or whatever. I have no truck with people who want, like, oh, but if you just mix like 10 seconds of my song, I'll be able to tell if you know how to... No, because it takes as much time to do this almost as a whole song. So no, it's not going to be cheap. It's just going to be a waste of everyone's time. But nonetheless, for this, it is instructive, so it's worth doing. So here's his, what we'll call, guide mix. This is, as noted here, what we'll call a good performance. Everything's tight, everything's together, there's nice move and groove. That's good. He said, okay, this will mix up way better than this. And he particularly talks, you have to go watch his video, particularly talks about poor hi-hat technique. Yes, to be fair, or unfair, this is a little quieter. For some reason, most of his performances in the shoddy category are not as loud, probably because he's having to think about how not to do it right. But things are generally just not as tight, not as together, not as good. And as a result, this is what we should have come in, and as you hear it, it works straight away with what we'll just call a guide mix. And this, it sounds weak. We can make it louder. So if we grab this guy here and add roughly 3 dB to it, you can go, okay, well that's good now. But compare it to this. This is pretty good. This is just louder, but it's still a bit scrappy. It's shoddy, but it was meant to be. And then he did it again with some more complex material compared to this. Now, my point here was to say, well, okay, I'll take that. You've let us have access to it. I'll take it and I'll put it through my process. I'll mix it as though it were my thing. So I'll run through the process of what I did, the steps to get here. I downloaded the stuff. It actually was not really multi-tracks. It was his Reaper project and the audio that sits in another folder in Reaper's process. So I opened Reaper, of course. I was met with the whole, you haven't got these plugins thing, which is the bane of sharing DAW files more often than not. To be expected, and seeing I was planning to do my own mix, it wasn't really a problem at all. I did get the project open. Oh, nasty. Oh, you nasty boy. I don't like Reaper, and it's just like, what a mess. But this is the nature of Reaper, and it looked like it was a rather impromptu casual recording session, not a actual song session. So I'm not going to be too judgy, other than to say, nasty boy. I did then go, okay, well, what if I just grab this audio and drop it in Reason? But it was a pretty silly thing to try and do. Of course, nothing lined up, so it was a disaster. Then I went through the process of having to work out how to export stems. I'm pretty sure it called it stems in Reaper. Multitracks, whatever, don't care, go argue with somebody else about your pedantry on whether it's stems or multitracks. I got the sounds out and dropped them into Reason, and so we ended up with something that looked quite a lot like this, only I chopped it and brought it all together, made it pretty colours so things match. This is my usual colouring process, and there we go. So we've got our guide mix up top, and then our individual takes down bottom, and then just I've added these, which is the closest we come to markers in Reason, and I don't care because I don't use markers, but just to help people get a sense of, oh, okay, that's what's going on there. In the rack, I put this first set, the first piece, shall we say, into one rack. I'll just actually turn that sequence off. So that's your first little piece. As you see, I've not done an awful lot. Most of the work has been in the rhythm bus. So that's our drum and bass put together, and but I did do some to the guitars because I wanted to make them more fun. There's no right or wrong here. They were just the decisions I made. And then the second piece over here, you can see there is a bit more work done to everything. There was a bit more to the piece, and I just wanted to get a little bit more exciting. Again, just the aim always going to be, well, how is the mix of what we'll call the good takes, and I think they are good takes, going to translate to the poor takes? Because if it sounds good with the good takes, some people will say, oh, well, it'll sound just as good with the bad takes. And let me tell you, it does not. And then, of course, I did my mixy stuff, which we'll walk through a little bit later. So if we get our sequencer back, we really need to see the top bits. And over here, sorry, I never work with one window. It's just too weird. The number one, doesn't go through the mastering or anything. The number two is the whole box and dice with reverb and everything. The first thing that we need to be fair about is there's going to be a big level difference. That's not really very fair, so I have added 3 dB here, but you can see it's just starting to clip. So it proves that a good, decent mix will allow you to get more without blowing your levels. And I am not relying heavily on any kind of this, just a tiny, tiny bit of glue compression or groove compression, and a tiny, tiny bit of slow limiting with a clipper across the top. So that's just so that you can see the process. So again, number one is the guide mix. Number two is what I chose to do as a mix. So mix. Sounds good. It's not about whether you like my mix decisions or not. I made deliberate decisions. Like I said, I'll walk through them a little bit later. Now, here it is, exactly the same thing. You can see it's on the same tracks, so there's no such thing as doing different mix versions or making any changes in the audio tracks in Reason. It's just this feeds through these processes, which are the ones that you see here. So it sounds, well, scrappy and shoddy. It's got that groove that we're looking for. It funks. Whereas this, it's not saved. As in, that the mix has not made it better, it's probably made it worse. So here's our guide mix. Here's the mix. it's I think made it worse because it's just made everything louder and more apparent, especially that hi-hat. Dude, it's awful. But that was your plan. So the shoddy performance is not saved. Here, the parts fit together. I've decided how I want the parts to fit together as the Benedict mix, and it works. Here they just don't fit together. Now, you could build the argument to say, well, you made the mix for this performance, you should have made the mix for this performance. Now, I did consider that, but because of my experience, when I get stuff like this, I know it's never really going to work out. So I prefer to not take it on at all. Sometimes you sort of have to, because there's parts of things that you like, or you just want the job, or you need the job, or whatever. But it's not really going to matter how much, and we'll look at the mix, how the mix was done and how I get this funk and grooving, emphasising the performance. It's not like I'm putting the funk and groove in there. But it won't matter how much I try and do that here. It will get louder, but it will still fundamentally have the problem we've got. Obviously, with this being a drum kit that was recorded with one mic, or close kit, and then one overhead, there is no ability to mix within this. The first thing one might want to do with this is find the hi-hat, pull it out. And if I were mixing separately, then I might go through and say, okay, where's a notch or a little peak to try and pull that back some, to try and resolve it. But we're still just going to have issues. That poor performance is never going to translate into this in any way, shape, or form. Now, before you go thinking, oh, but that's just to do with people who play things live and wave their hands around. I do MIDI, therefore all my stuff's tight. No, I have made videos in the past on that, on, showing how I've been sent broken grooves, whether that's loop stuff that people have thrown together or MIDI, but it doesn't funk because the parts are wrong. It's still just as poor. If your parts are poor for whatever reason, you can't mix them right. And again, no matter what we do, we can't make that actually make this performance sound any good. So Mr. AP Mastering is correct, as anticipated, that if you've got poor performances, poor construction of your song, there is no way that any remotely skilled mix engineer, let alone those that are unskilled, and by skills I mean true deep understanding, not just I've got 11 tips and tricks, therefore I'm more pro than everybody else. There's no way we can make it work. Matter of fact, we will undo it. The more work we try to do, the more we undo it. Just as you can hear here, this probably sounds better like this, because it's honest, than like this, because it just sounds grating and unpleasant. Loud, but grating and unpleasant. Then the second one, this is cool. This is quite interesting. That's his guide mix. Now, I made some definite decisions about this, and I got a lot more creative. Did the Benedict thing. Then we'll go back and unmixed, mixed, shoddy performances. Hear how we effectively lose all of the nuance of this. It probably works better in non-mix than this, which just makes it a bigger mess than it was, when it should be this. So I think he's proven his point really well. That was the reason why he let us have access to this project, and I've agreed with his point all along. in that as a mix engineer, where people send me stuff that's poorly conceived, either because it's poorly constructed, as in their arrangement is poor, or they've got instruments that don't mesh nicely, or just performances that don't achieve their end. This is meant to be a bit funky, and this doesn't meet the requirements of the piece. Now, if you're not good enough to achieve what you want, that's okay, and this is a big thing, that when you're beginning, you're expected to be rough. If we go back to first records from some quite famous bands, they're not their most sophisticated. But if they focus all their energy on trying to appear as sophisticated, then they sound worse than they are. Whereas if they put all their energy into going, I'm going to put in a dynamic performance, it's gut-wrenching, then yes, they're not ready to be making, Born in the USA type records, but that record that they make that's got passion in the performance, and this has no passion, it's frightened. It becomes frightening, but it's frightened in its performance. Then it's unmixable, because all we do is emphasize that frightened feel, and it becomes frightfully bad. And one of the reasons that people send this kind of stuff, the shoddy stuff, off to be mixed in the hope that someone like me can turn it into magic, is because they're afraid to be honest. Which is why I say it's better, generally this is generally better like this. You can hear that it's a band that's trying to achieve something, not really getting there, but this would work better as an honest mix than this, which just highlights how unready they are to do the things that they want to do. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't aim towards that, but they haven't found their own centre yet, and therefore obsessing about microphones, wall padding, speakers, tips and tricks, all this kind of garbage means that they're not focusing on what's important. What's important has to be the passion of the thing. Now, Mr. AP Mastering obviously can play well enough to do this. And I hate the funky chair dance that every wannabe producer does, but I'm trying to get across the point that this does funk, this moves, this doesn't. So it doesn't mean get better before you make a record, although there is massive mileage in that. But my point is always, the way to get better is to let the passion out. And if it's raw, that's fine. Ramones were always raw. Dead Kennedys were raw. Lots of those bands that are amazing are raw. The Pistols, half of them couldn't play properly. I think none of them could play when they started. Well, no, one of them could play when they started, I think. The reality here is Bollocks is an amazing record. Doesn't matter whether you're into it or not, it's amazing record, like early Ramones, amazing records. Venom, favourite awful band. They probably made a career of deliberately being a bit awful. But the thing is, their fans love them because it's passionate. So rather than obsessing about technicalities, and especially technicalities about gear and mixing techniques and all this kinds of BS, focus on getting a lively performance. If your performance is lively and not a shoddy mess like that, then it's mixable. If it's a shoddy mess because you're busy obsessing about your gear or your tips and tricks and your producer-iness, then that's all that's going to show in the final result. Someone can make it loud. Better mix engineers will probably try to bypass it. I try to bypass it because there's no win in it. And it means that you're working then with worse mix engineers, especially those idiots that charge $15 on Fiber. And their name's Freddie, of course. And all they do is make everything loud and maybe quantize everything and go, now it's great. And it's like, no, there's no passion in this. This is not the Ramones. This is not Bollocks. This is not Venom. This is not Bathory. This is not anything worth anything. It's just a loud, quantized mess. Okay, So thanks very much to Mr. AP Mastering for putting up his stems. I assumed that gives permission for someone like myself to meddle with them. I think he's very much proven his point. On your AP for having the courage to say it. I have been saying it for a couple of decades. People piss on me for it. No doubt people are going to piss on him for it, as they have for the other things, truisms that he's pointed out. But again, on your dude for having the courage to say it. I back you. I support you. If you are interested in having work done with this kind of mindset, I'm easy to find. Get out there. Have a great day.